In the scorching deserts of Arizona, an explosive confrontation is about to unfold. When a ruthless biker gang encounters Deputy Lisa Martinez at a remote gas station, they think they're dealing with just another female K9 handler. They couldn't be more wrong. Lisa isn't your typical cop. For 15 years, she was one of the deadliest Marine Corps dog handlers in combat history, leading her dogs through missions in Fallujah and Kandahar that will never see declassification. Her dogs Rex and Shadow aren't ordinary police K9s. What starts as simple intimidation will expose a criminal organization reaching deep into Mexican cartels, leading to a savage showdown where a woman and her war dogs remind the criminal underworld. Before we jump back into the video, let us know where you're watching from. And if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe because I have something really special for you tomorrow. And now back to the video. The Arizona sun beat down on Lisa Martinez as she pulled her K9 unit into the desert gas station. After 15 years as a Marine Corps dog handler, including 3 combat tours, she was used to the heat. Her 2 Belgian Malinois, Rex and Shadow, sat alert in their specially equipped compartment, watching everything through tinted windows. She noticed the motorcycles first. A dozen Harley-Davidsons lined up outside the small convenience store. The Dogs of War MC colors marked them as one of the more violent outlaw clubs moving up from Mexico. As a sheriff's deputy now, she'd been tracking their growing presence in the county. "Easy, boys," she murmured to her dogs who had tensed at the sight of the bikers. Rex and Shadow had served multiple combat tours themselves, trained for much more than standard police work. But that wasn't common knowledge. 3 bikers blocked her path as she headed for the store entrance. Their leader, a heavily tattooed man with butcher on his cut, looked her up and down with a sneer. "Well, look. What we got here? Lady cop playing K9 handler. Those puppies actually trained, or are they just for show?" Lisa had heard it all before. The mockery, the dismissal, the assumption that a woman couldn't handle working dogs. She'd proved them wrong in Fallujah and Kandahar. She'd prove them wrong here too. "Step aside," she said calmly. "Official business." Or, what? Butcher stepped closer, towering over her. "Gonna sick your purse dogs on us?" The other bikers laughed, but Lisa noticed they were carefully positioning themselves around her. These weren't random thugs. They had tactical training. "Last warning," she said. "Back off." "Or what, little girl? Those mutts don't scare." He never finished the sentence. A low growl from the K9 unit made all 3 bikers freeze. Through the windows, Rex and Shadow were showing their teeth. Not the standard police dog display, but the cold focus of combat-trained operators who had taken down Taliban fighters. "Those aren't police dogs, are they?" One of the bikers recognized the "Look, those are Marine Corps Special Operations Command," Lisa finished. "Multiple combat tours. Now want to rethink your position?" But Butcher was already reaching under his vest, and Lisa saw the glint of a weapon. Before he could draw, she gave a sharp whistle, a specific command her dogs knew from combat zones. The K9 unit's doors burst open. Rex and Shadow moved like the elite operators they were, crossing the distance in seconds. The bikers found themselves pinned by 140 pounds of muscle, teeth, and combat experience. Dogs trained not just to subdue, but to kill if necessary. "Fun fact about Marine Corps dogs," Lisa said casually, keeping her hand near her sidearm. "They're trained for a lot more than just smelling drugs. Want to see what else they learned in Afghanistan?" Through the store window, she could see the other bikers reaching for weapons. But her dogs had already established complete control, demonstrating why Special Operations K9 units were feared even by hardened fighters. "Stand down," Butcher ordered his men, real fear in his voice now. "Stand down." Lisa smiled coldly. The day was just beginning, and these bikers were about to learn why you never underestimate a female handler with combat-trained dogs. Blood dripped from Rex's fangs as the massive dog held Butcher pinned to the scorching asphalt. Shadow circled the other bikers, a lethal ghost trained in the killing fields of Afghanistan. These weren't police K9s showing restraint. These were war dogs ready to rip throats. "Last chance," Lisa warned as more bikers poured from the store, weapons appearing. Ask your friends who served overseas about Marine Corps dog teams. Ask them what happened to fighters who threatened us in Fallujah. Butcher had swagger before. Now he saw death in Rex's eyes, the same cold killer instinct that had taken down suicide bombers and Taliban fighters. "You don't understand what you're starting," he choked out. "The dogs of war don't forget." "We'll," Rex's growl cut him off, jaws tightening just enough to draw blood. The dog's muscles tensed, combat training screaming to finish the threat. "That's the thing about war dogs," Lisa said, her voice ice cold. "They remember combat. Right now, my boy Rex is thinking about that Taliban fighter who tried to knife me outside Kandahar. Want to guess what happened to him?" The other bikers froze as shadow moved like a shadow of death around them. One reached for a concealed shotgun. In a blur of black fur and razor teeth, the dog had him on the ground, fangs an inch from his jugular. 3 tours in the bloodiest combat zones on Earth, Lisa continued. My dogs didn't just chase bad guys, they were weaponized by the Marine Corps to eliminate high-value targets. To kill. Terror filled Butcher's eyes as he finally understood. These weren't pets playing cop. These were elite operators with body counts, 4-legged assassins who'd been unleashed in the worst battles of the war on terror. "Stand down!" he screamed to his men. "Everyone stand the fuck down!" But the dogs of war had started something they couldn't stop. And in the desert heat, a female K9 handler they'd dismissed as weak was about to remind them why hardened fighters called her dogs the devil's wolves. The dogs of war learned fast that they'd kicked a hornet's nest. Within hours of the gas station incident, their clubhouse erupted in chaos. Lisa's dogs had left their mark. Butcher's throat needed 20 stitches, and 3 other bikers were in the hospital. "They're coming," her old Marine contact warned through a burner phone. Cartels sending up their own dog teams. Ex-military contractors who train dogs for blood sports. Real sick bastards. Lisa watched surveillance footage from her reinforced K9 compound. After 15 years running combat operations, she'd built more than just a training facility. This was a fortress designed by someone who'd learned hard lessons in urban warfare. Rex and Shadow moved like silent killers through their practiced patrol routes. These weren't the same dogs that had terrorized the bikers hours ago. Now they were in full combat mode. Every muscle tensed for war, every sense tuned to detect threats, just like the bloody days in Fallujah. "Remember that cluster of buildings in Kandahar?" Lisa asked her dogs as she checked her weapons. "The ones they said couldn't be cleared without losing half a platoon." She smiled grimly. "We proved them wrong then. We'll prove them wrong now." Her phone buzzed. Images from a cartel safe house across the border. Attack dogs being loaded into armored vehicles, bred for maximum aggression and trained to tear. Flesh. Their handlers were ex-military too, but they'd twisted their skills into something savage. "They have 20 dogs coming," her contact reported. "Plus 30 operators. Heavy weapons. They're not playing around." "Good," Lisa replied, watching Rex and Shadow move through their kill house drills. Her dogs flowed like liquid death, hitting target after target with lethal precision. Neither am I. The cartel thought numbers would overwhelm her. They didn't understand what made Special Operations K9 teams so lethal. It wasn't just training or aggression. It was intelligence, strategy, the ability to turn animals into tactical weapons. Night fell over the desert as Lisa activated her compound's defense systems. Military-grade sensors, hidden bunkers, pre-sighted, kill zones. Everything a veteran handler had learned to survive in combat zones. "Fun fact about Marine Corps dog teams," she transmitted on a frequency she knew the cartel monitored. "In Fallujah, 2 of us held off 30 insurgents. Want to know what happened to them?" Her cameras caught movement on the perimeter. The cartel's dog teams were arriving, trying to set up a coordinated assault. But Lisa had chosen this ground carefully. Every approach funneled attackers exactly where she wanted them. Rex and Shadow stood ready, their muscles coiled with lethal purpose. These weren't the controlled K9s from the gas station confrontation. Tonight, they'd be unleashed fully, allowed to become the weapons the Marine Corps had forged in combat. You think you know war dogs? Lisa's voice cut through their tactical frequencies. You've got attack dogs trained for brutality. I've got combat operators who've killed more high-value targets than your entire cartel. Through her scopes, she watched their forces assemble. They thought they were setting up an overwhelming assault. Instead, they were walking into a trap, set by someone who'd learned warfare in the hardest possible way. Last chance to walk away, she broadcast. Ask yourselves, why would one handler with 2 dogs choose to stand and fight? What do I know that you don't? The desert night hummed with tension as Lisa's fingers found the detonator that would start her defensive sequence. The cartel was about to learn what Taliban fighters had discovered too late. Sometimes the deadliest predators aren't the ones with the most teeth. Sometimes they're the ones who've spent years learning to turn violence into an art form. And in the darkness, Rex and Shadow waited like coiled springs, ready to remind these criminals why Marine Corps dog teams were the most feared units in modern warfare. The cartel struck at midnight. 20 attack dogs surged forward, bred for brutality and trained to kill. Behind them, armed operators moved in tactical formation, expecting an easy victory against 1 woman and 2 dogs. The night erupted in precise violence. Rex and Shadow moved like ghosts through pre-planned killing zones. These weren't police K9s following standard takedown protocols. These were combat veterans executing battlefield tactics perfected in urban warfare. Contact front, someone shouted in Spanish. Where are they? How? His voice cut off as Shadow struck from the darkness. The massive dog didn't just attack. He executed a combat maneuver that snapped the handler's neck before disappearing back into the shadows. These aren't normal dogs, another operator screamed. They're moving like spec ops teams. Lisa's voice cut through their panic. Welcome to how real military dogs fight. Everything you've seen before, that was us being gentle. The cartel's attack dogs found themselves outmaneuvered at every turn. Their brute force aggression meant nothing against Rex and Shadow's lethal precision. One by one, they fell to synchronized attacks that looked more like special forces operations than dogfights. Impossible! The cartel commander watched his forces being systematically destroyed. They're just dogs. No, Lisa replied coldly. They're Marine Corps weapons, the kind that helped clear Fallujah house by house, the kind that hunted down suicide bombers before they could trigger their vests. Through her night vision, she watched Rex execute a maneuver that had once saved an entire Marine platoon, using his superior training to herd enemy forces into a pre-sighted kill zone. Shadow moved in perfect coordination, eliminating any hope of escape. You brought attack dogs to a war dog fight, Lisa broadcast. Want to see what else they learned in combat? The night air filled with screams as her dogs demonstrated exactly why the Marine Corps had invested millions in their training. This wasn't about brute force or aggression. This was about turning animals into precision weapons. By dawn, the cartel's forces lay broken. Their savage attack dogs were dead or fled, their operators either casualties or running in terror. And in the center of it all stood Lisa with her 2 dogs, barely winded from the night's carnage. Send a message back to your bosses, she told the survivors. Tell them what you saw here. Tell them why Marine Corps dog teams were the most feared units in modern warfare. Rex and Shadow stood alert beside her, their muscles still coiled for combat. They weren't done yet. This was just the beginning of a war that would remind the criminal underworld why you never threaten a handler who learned her trade in the killing fields of Fallujah. Blood and brass casings littered the desert sand as Lisa studied the carnage through her tactical scope. 24 hours after the battle, the cartel's response arrived. 3 black helicopters carrying their elite kill team. They've brought in Los Lobos, her Marine contact warned. Ex-Mexican special forces who specialize in hunting down military K9 units. They've killed 12 handler teams in the past year. Rex and Shadow showed no fear as the helicopters circled. Combat-hardened muscles tensed, ready for war. These dogs had faced worse in Fallujah's bloody streets. I know Los Lobos, Lisa transmitted on an open frequency. Kandahar 2014. They lost 6 men trying to eliminate my team. Want to try again? The kill team's commander responded immediately. The ghost handler. We wondered if it was you. Your dogs took Jorge's arm that night. He was lucky. The Taliban fighters who tried to rush us weren't. Through her thermal imaging, Lisa watched Los Lobos deploy with lethal precision. These weren't amateur cartel thugs. These were professional operators who understood exactly what they were hunting. Your reputation in combat zones is legendary, the commander continued. But this time we came prepared. No more games with attack dogs. This is a full tactical operation. Lisa smiled coldly. You still don't understand. Rex and Shadow aren't just dogs. They're combat multipliers. Want to see why terrorist cells had nightmares about Marine Corps K9 teams? The helicopters opened fire, miniguns tearing up the desert night. But Lisa had learned hard lessons about surviving overwhelming firepower. Her compound's defense grid activated, and the real battle began. Rex and Shadow moved like liquid death through the chaos, executing combat maneuvers that made hardened Special Forces operators freeze in shock. This wasn't just animal aggression. This was tactical warfare conducted by 4-legged weapons. Impossible! Someone screamed as Shadow eliminated 3 operators in under 10 seconds. No dog can move like that! That's because you've never seen real war dogs, Lisa replied, triggering her trap zones. The ones bred for violence, they're just animals. Mine are soldiers. The night erupted in precise carnage as Los Lobos learned why Lisa's K9 unit had the highest confirmed kill count in Marine Corps history. Every attack they launched was countered by techniques perfected in the worst battles of modern warfare. Still want to play? Lisa asked as her dogs systematically dismantled the elite kill team. Or should I show you what else they learned in combat? The desert would remember this night, when the deadliest K9 handler in military history reminded the criminal underworld why some legends are best left alone. The morning after Los Lobos' destruction brought new threats. Surveillance drones circled Lisa's compound as cartel forces regrouped. The dogs of war had called in every favor, emptied every account, hiring the deadliest operators money could buy. They're bringing in Russian Spetsnaz veterans, her Marine contact warned. Former FSB K9 handlers who specialized in crushing Chechen resistance. These guys make Los Lobos look like amateurs. Lisa watched Rex and Shadow conduct their morning patrol. Most handlers would rest their dogs after such intense combat. But these weren't ordinary K9s. They were weapons forged in warfare's hottest fires. The Russians are different, she told her dogs as they checked the perimeter. They understand. Real military dogs. They won't underestimate you like the cartel did. Her secure phone buzzed with intel from border sensors. Heavy vehicles moving north, carrying specialized equipment. The Russians weren't just bringing dogs. They were deploying a full combat task force. Remember that classified operation in Syria? Lisa asked as she checked her tactical feeds. When we faced down Spetsnaz teams in Damascus? Time to show them what else we learned that night. Through her command center's screens, she studied the approaching force. 50 operators minimum, with support vehicles and electronic warfare gear. They'd learned from Los Lobos' mistakes. This would be a coordinated military operation. The ghost handler, a heavily accented voice cut through her encrypted frequency. Damascus left quite an impression. 3 of my best handlers died that night. Colonel Volkov, Lisa recognized the voice instantly. Still angry about losing your elite K9 unit to a woman? That was war, he replied coldly. This is business. $10 million to eliminate you and your dogs. To prove that Mother Russia's methods are still supreme, Lisa smiled as she activated her compound's more lethal defenses, the ones she'd designed based on harsh lessons from urban combat. You forgot the most important lesson from Damascus, Colonel. Want me to remind you? Rex and Shadow moved to their assault positions, combat-hardened muscles coiled with deadly purpose. These dogs had faced down Russia's best before. They'd do it again. Your dogs are famous, Volkov transmitted, as his forces established a siege perimeter. The Americans spent millions creating the perfect war dogs, but you never faced our new breeds, the ones we engineered specifically for killing other K9 units. Through her scopes, Lisa watched them unload their dogs, massive, cybernetically, enhanced monsters that looked more machine than animal. The Russians had twisted military dog programs into something nightmarish. "That's your problem, Colonel," she replied. "You think this is about breeding or training, about creating better, killing machines. And what do you think it's about, Ghost Handler?" The bond between handler and dog. Something the Russians never understood. Why Marine Corps teams dominated every joint operation. Why my 2 dogs are worth more than your entire enhanced pack. 2. Demonstrate, she gave a complex series of hand signals. Rex and Shadow immediately executed a combat maneuver that would have been impossible for normal dogs, flowing like liquid death through prepared fighting positions. "Remember what happened when your enhanced dogs faced mine in Damascus?" Lisa asked. "How your superior breeding meant nothing against real combat experience." "That was different," Volkov growled. "This time we have you surrounded, overwhelmed. There's no escape." "Funny," Lisa replied as she triggered the first phase of her defense plan. "That's exactly what you said in Damascus, right before my dog showed you why Marine Corps K9 teams were the most feared units in modern warfare." The desert night came, alive with combat as Lisa Martinez, the legendary ghost handler, prepared to remind the Russians why some military forces are best left unchallenged. This wasn't just about dogs fighting dogs anymore. This was about proving that the bond between handler and war dog, forged in the crucible of real combat, was more powerful than any laboratory-enhanced creature. And by dawn, the desert would run red with the proof. The enhanced Russian dogs moved like cybernetic nightmares through the darkness. Metal implants gleamed under thermal imaging as they charged Lisa's position, bred for maximum aggression and augmented with experimental combat tech. "Release the pack," Volkov ordered. "Show the ghost handler what real military dogs can do." Rex and Shadow stood their ground, combat-hardened muscles tensed. These dogs had faced down suicide bombers in Fallujah. No amount of artificial enhancement could match that experience. "Remember what I taught you in Damascus," Lisa whispered to her dogs. "Tech doesn't beat tactics. Metal doesn't beat heart." The Russian dogs struck like a wave of engineered death. 20 cybernetically enhanced killing machines against 2 Marine Corps veterans. The night erupted in savage combat. But where the Russian dogs relied on brute force and mechanical advantage, Rex and Shadow moved with lethal precision. Every attack was countered with techniques perfected in real combat. Every charge met with killing force applied to vulnerable points no amount of enhancement could protect. "Impossible!" Volkov raged as his enhanced dogs fell one by one. "They're just flesh and blood. How are they defeating our superior breeds?" "Because you still don't understand," Lisa replied as her dogs systematically dismantled the Russian pack. War dogs aren't about strength or aggression. They're about intelligence, experience, the bond between handler and dog. To demonstrate, she gave a complex series of hand signals. Rex and Shadow immediately split up, executing a pincer movement that had once trapped an entire Taliban unit. The Russian dogs, for all their enhancements, couldn't match that level of tactical coordination. "Your enhanced monsters fight like machines," Lisa transmitted. "Mine fight like soldiers. Want to guess which works better in real combat?" The desert. Night filled with dying howls as Rex and Shadow proved why natural skill beat artificial enhancement. Why experience in actual warfare meant more than laboratory modifications. "Fall back," Volkov ordered as his prized pack was decimated. "Full retreat. These aren't just dogs, they're Marine Corps war dogs," Lisa finished coldly. "The ones who wrote the book on tactical K9 warfare, the ones who taught special forces teams how real military dogs fight." By dawn, the Russians' enhanced pack lay broken. Their cybernetic augmentations meant nothing against dogs who'd learned combat in the hardest possible way, through actual warfare. Send a message to your bosses, Lisa broadcast as Volkov's forces retreated. Tell them what happened when they sent machines to fight warriors. Tell them why some military units are best left unchallenged. Rex and Shadow stood alert beside her, barely winded from the night's battle. These dogs hadn't just survived combat, they'd mastered it, and they were about to show the criminal underworld what that really meant. 3 days after the Russians' defeat, Lisa's compound transformed into a fortress. Intelligence reports confirmed what she'd feared. Multiple criminal organizations were uniting against her. The Cartel, outlaw bikers, and international mercenaries had formed an alliance with one goal: eliminate the ghost handler and her legendary war dogs. They're bringing in everyone, her Marine contact warned. South African private military contractors, Israeli K9 specialists, former Chinese special forces, over 200 operators converging on your position. Lisa watched Rex and Shadow conduct their patrol, noting how they'd adapted their movements to account for the increased threats. Most handlers would be overwhelmed facing such odds. But most handlers hadn't survived 3 tours in the bloodiest combat zones on Earth. "Remember that classified operation in Mogadishu?" she asked her dogs, as they checked their defensive positions. "When they said 2 dogs couldn't hold an entire street against insurgent forces? We proved them wrong then. We'll prove them wrong now." Her tactical screens lit up with movement. Armored vehicles approaching from multiple directions, carrying the deadliest K9 units money could buy. Attack helicopters circled overhead, their thermal imaging searching for weaknesses in her defenses. "The ghost handler," a new voice cut through her secured frequency. "I've waited years for this reunion." Lisa's blood ran cold. She recognized that voice. Commander Zhang, former Chinese special forces. The man who'd tried to steal her training, secrets in Afghanistan. "Still bitter about losing your entire K9 program to 2 Marine Corps dogs?" she asked, triggering her compound's more lethal defensive measures. "Your dogs humiliated China's best handlers," Zhang replied coldly. "Now, we'll show the world that our methods are superior, that American war dogs are obsolete." Through her scopes, Lisa watched them unload their K9 units. Each team represented a different nation's approach to military dogs, from South African, brute force to Israeli tactical precision. All of them had fought her dogs before. All of them had lost. "You're making the same mistake as the Russians," Lisa transmitted. "Thinking this is about training methods or national pride. You still don't understand what makes Marine Corps dogs different." "Enlighten us, ghost handler," Zhang's voice dripped with sarcasm. "What makes your 2 dogs worth more than our combined K9 forces?" "Combat experience," she replied simply. "Real warfare, not training exercises. My dogs haven't just practiced killing, they've done it. Against suicide bombers, hardened fighters, other K9 units. Each battle taught them something no amount of training can replicate." To demonstrate, she gave a series of complex hand signals. Rex and Shadow immediately executed a combat maneuver that left the observing handlers stunned, flowing like liquid death through prepared fighting positions with a precision that seemed impossible. "Remember what happened in Kandahar?" Lisa asked. "When your best handlers tried to copy our techniques? How many dogs did you lose learning that some skills can't be stolen or duplicated?" "That was different," Zhang snarled. "This time we have overwhelming force. Every major K9 program united against you. There's no escape." "Funny," Lisa replied, as her first defensive line activated. "That's what the Taliban said too. Right before my dogs showed them why Marine Corps K9 teams wrote the book on modern warfare." The desert night hummed with lethal purpose as the largest gathering of military dog units in history prepared to eliminate one handler and her 2 war dogs. But they'd forgotten the most important lesson from their previous encounters. Sometimes the deadliest predators aren't the ones with the most teeth or the best training. Sometimes they're the ones who've learned their trade in actual combat, who've turned warfare into an art form through blood and sacrifice. And as Lisa Martinez prepared to remind the world why Marine Corps dogs were feared even by other K9 units, she knew one thing for certain: this night would become legend in military history. The night two American war dogs faced down the combined might of the world's deadliest K9 programs. The night the ghost handler showed them all why some legends are best left unchallenged. The desert exploded in savage warfare as the world's deadliest K9 units converged on Lisa's position. South African attack dogs charged like tanks, while Israeli tactical teams moved with lethal precision. Chinese handlers released their finest killing machines, each one trained to eliminate other military dogs. Show them why Marine Corps dogs dominated every joint operation, Lisa whispered to Rex and Shadow. Show them what real combat experience means. Her war dogs moved like death itself through the chaos. Where other units relied on specialized training, Rex and Shadow drew on actual combat experience. Every attack they faced had been seen before in the brutal streets of Fallujah or the mountains of Afghanistan. Impossible, Zhang screamed as his elite K9 units fell. They're just two dogs. How are they defeating our combined forces? Because you trained for warfare, Lisa replied coldly. My dogs lived it. Through her tactical feeds, she watched the battle unfold. The South Africans' brute force approach shattered against Rex's combat-proven techniques. Shadow's precision strikes decimated the Israeli tactical teams. Even the Chinese Special Forces dogs, engineered for maximum lethality, couldn't match the pure killing efficiency of real war veterans. Remember Kandahar? Lisa broadcast as her dogs systematically dismantled the world's finest K9 units. When 30 handlers tried to copy our methods, this is why they failed. Some skills can only be learned in combat. To demonstrate, she gave a complex series of hand signals. Rex and Shadow immediately executed the Ghost Protocol, a combat maneuver that had once eliminated an entire Taliban compound. The international K9 forces found themselves herded into prepared kill zones, their superior numbers turned against them. Fall back, various handlers screamed in different languages. These aren't normal war dogs. They're something else. They're Marine Corps combat veterans, Lisa corrected, as her dogs pressed their advantage. The ones who wrote the book on tactical K9 warfare. The ones who taught Special Forces teams what real military dogs can do. The night air filled with the sounds of defeat, as the world's deadliest K9 programs learned why Marine Corps dogs were feared even by other military units. Rex and Shadow moved with impossible precision, every motion honed by actual warfare. Their attackers had trained for years, but Lisa's dogs had spent 3 tours perfecting their craft in real combat. You still don't understand, Lisa told Zhang as his last elite unit fell. This was never about training methods or national pride. It was about experience, about the bond between handler and dog forged in actual battle. The desert night revealed the carnage as dawn approached. Over 50 military dogs lay defeated, their specialized training meaning nothing against combat-proven veterans. The international handlers retreated in shock, their combined might broken by 2 American war dogs. Send a message to your masters. Lisa broadcast on all frequencies. Tell them what happened when they sent their finest against real combat veterans. Tell them why Marine Corps K9 teams were the most feared units in modern warfare. But this victory had consequences. By defeating the world's elite K9 programs, Lisa had painted an even bigger target on herself. More enemies would come, drawn by the chance to eliminate the legendary ghost handler. Rex and Shadow stood alert beside her, their muscles still coiled for combat. These dogs hadn't just survived another battle. They'd cemented their place in military history. And they were about to remind the criminal underworld why some legends are best left unchallenged. They'll send worse next time, her Marine contact warned. Everyone will want to prove they can take down the handlers who defeated the world's best. Lisa checked her tactical feeds, already planning for the next wave of attackers. Let them come. They'll learn what every other force discovered the hard way, that Marine Corps dogs don't just fight for victory. She watched the sun rise over her desert fortress, casting long shadows across the battlefield where international K9 units had learned their harsh lesson. We fight for each other, she finished quietly. and that makes us more dangerous than any trained killer's money can buy. The final battle came at midnight, 1 week after the international K9 forces fell. Lisa's compound sensors detected an unprecedented force approaching, over 300 operators converging on her position. Every major criminal organization had united, determined to eliminate the legend of the ghost handler. "They've brought something new," her Marine contact warned. "Experimental combat units. Things that blur the line between animal and machine. The kind of weapons that aren't supposed to exist." Through her thermal scopes, Lisa watched them unload their forces. Enhanced dogs with cybernetic augments. Genetically engineered predators that barely looked canine anymore. The underworld had emptied its darkest laboratories, bringing horrors bred only for killing. "Remember what I always taught you," she told Rex and Shadow as they prepared for combat. "Technology doesn't beat experience. Machines don't beat heart." Her war dogs stood ready, combat-hardened muscles tensed for battle. These weren't just military K9s anymore. They were living legends who had defeated every elite unit sent against them. Their reputation had spread through the criminal underworld, drawing the most dangerous forces on Earth to this final confrontation. Ghost. Handler. The transmission came on all frequencies. "This is the director. You've cost our organizations billions, exposed our operations, humiliated our best units." "And I'm about to cost you more," Lisa replied, activating her compound's most lethal defenses, the ones she'd designed based on classified military protocols. "You're surrounded by the largest private army ever assembled," the director continued. "Enhanced combat units from black projects even governments don't know about. There's no escape this time." Lisa smiled as she gave Rex and Shadow their final instructions. That's what they all said. Before my dogs showed them why Marine Corps K9 teams wrote the book on modern warfare. The night erupted in savage combat as the enhanced units charged. Cybernetic monsters and genetic abominations flooded toward her position, backed by the world's deadliest operators. But where these creatures relied on artificial improvements, Rex and Shadow drew on real combat experience. "Impossible!" handlers screamed as their enhanced units fell. "They're defeating our superior breeds." "Because you still don't understand," Lisa broadcast as her dogs systematically dismantled the attackers. War dogs aren't about strength or technology. They're about the bond between handler and dog, about experience earned in actual combat. The desert night filled with dying howls as Rex and Shadow proved why natural skill beat artificial enhancement. Why veterans of real warfare would always defeat laboratory creations. The director's forces found themselves facing something their enhanced units couldn't match, the pure killing efficiency of genuine combat experience. "Fall back." The order came too late. Lisa's dogs had already sprung their trap, herding the attackers into prepared kill zones. Years of real combat had taught them how to turn superior numbers against themselves. "You brought machines to a warrior's fight," Lisa told the director as his forces crumbled. "Made the same mistake everyone makes, thinking technology beats training. That artificial power beats real experience." By dawn, the largest private army ever assembled lay in ruins. Enhanced units and elite operators had learned why Marine Corps dogs were feared even by other military forces. Lisa's compound stood unbreached, defended by 2 war dogs who had rewritten the rules of modern combat. "Send a message to every organization that wanted me dead," she broadcast on all frequencies. "Tell them what happened when they sent their best against real veterans. Tell them why some legends are best left unchallenged." The criminal underworld learned its lesson. The ghost handler became more than just a legend. She became a warning. A reminder that sometimes the deadliest predators aren't the ones with the most advanced technology or the biggest armies. Sometimes they're the ones who learned their trade in actual combat, who forged unbreakable bonds through shared warfare, who turned military service into an art form that no laboratory could replicate. Rex and Shadow stood beside her as the sun rose over their desert fortress, still alert despite the night's carnage. These dogs had become more than just military K9s. They had become symbols of what real combat experience meant against artificial enhancement. "Ready for patrol?" Lisa asked her dogs, knowing they'd never truly rest. Because that's what made Marine Corps teams different. Why they dominated every conflict they entered. They didn't fight for victory or glory. They fought for each other. And that made them more dangerous than any enhanced unit could ever be. The legend of the ghost handler would live on, told in whispers through the criminal underworld. A warning to those who thought superior numbers or advanced technology could defeat real combat veterans. A reminder that some military forces earned their reputation the hard way, through blood and sacrifice in actual warfare. And somewhere in the Arizona desert, a former Marine Corps handler and her 2 war dogs stood ready, prepared to remind the world why you never threaten those who learned. Their trade in combat's crucible